Hi, good morning. This is Gareth from Big Game Bikes. I wanted to do a follow-up video for you all about the two most popular performance upgrades that you can get for your Rad bike, and those are the EggRider and this big 35 amp controller. Now, before I get into how these two devices work, it's worth thinking about what your bicycle is currently capable of. So the first thing that's to think about is the fact that the display on your bicycle controls all of the rules inside of your controller. And on your Rad bike, that display has a whole load of functions that are simply not available to you. And both the 35 amp controller and the EggRider remove those barriers. So both of these devices allow you full access to all of your bicycle's functionality and capability. So the first thing to think about is the fact that the geared hub motor on all of Rad's bike is a 500 watt motor. Think about watts for a second. Watts equal power, hill climbing oomph. So in Europe, your Rad bike will be restricted to 250 watts, and in North America, your bicycle will be restricted to 750 watts. Now, that might not make a great deal of sense, but there's a rationale behind that, okay? If you take off your Rad controller and you have a look, there's a sticker on your Rad controller, okay? And that sticker will have a voltage and a maximum amperage. And on my Rad wagon, for example, it's 19 amps. So if you take 48 volts multiplied by 19 amps, you get 912 watts. And that's how I know my bicycle has been restricted to 250 watts or restricted to 750 watts, okay? And that is where the EggRider comes into play and where the 35 amp controller come into play. Let's talk about the EggRider first. The EggRider is a tiny display, a little bit bigger than my thumb, right? And the EggRider display gives you full visibility, access and control of all of the settings on your stock controller. So if your stock controller is capable of outputting a maximum of 19 amps, the EggRider is going to give you the ability to alter the settings on your controller to access all 19 amps. So now instead of being restricted to 250 watts or being restricted to 750 watts, you can now access 912 watts. In fact, it peaks a little bit higher than that. All right, I'm not going to get into that in this video, but that is what the EggRider does. The EggRider allows you to totally de-restrict and access all of the settings and all of the features that are currently hidden or locked on your existing display. Now, the second upgrade is a hardware upgrade, okay? And what we're doing with this 35 amp controller is we're replacing the controller on your bicycle with a new, much bigger controller. And we're replacing the display because this controller does not talk the same language as your Rad display. You know, they use different communication protocols. So that's why you can't plug this controller into your Rad display. When I say hardware change, do you remember the sums we did a moment ago? 48 times 19 is 912 watts. Well, 48 volts times 35 amps is 1,680 watts. So the EggRider is going to give you 900 watts of hill climbing power, and this is going to give you 1,680 watts of hill climbing power. Okay, so there's a big difference there. The other thing that's worth bearing in mind is that neither of these devices are going to get you a tremendous amount of speed, and that's because the way that the actual motors are designed is such that the motors can only spin at a certain speed, And that's why whether you go for the 35 amp controller or you go for the EggRider, you're going to top out with a full battery at about 23 to 25 mile an hour, 40 kilometers an hour, something like that. With the 35 amp controller, you're going to get to that speed much more quickly. And if you encounter an incline or a hill, you'll maintain that with this device. And with the EggRider, similar results will occur. Now, it goes without saying, of course, that the more power you're taking from your battery, the bigger impact it's going to have on your range. You cannot have one without the other. But it is worth bearing in mind that you're unlikely to constantly pull those high wattage numbers from the controller. So let's talk for a second about the geared hub motor that you've got on your bicycle. Okay, it's 500 watts, restricted in Europe to 250 watts, restricted in North America to 750 watts. One of the other upgrades, one of the other performance upgrades that's available is a 750 watt motor. Now, if we talk about those wattages, they're what they call nominal wattages. They're the wattage that the motor is designed to run the most efficiently at and the best at. And that's not entirely true. What I mean by that is with the 500 watt motor, for example, you can happily push double that, 1,000 watts through that motor all day long without negatively or adversely affecting the lifespan of that motor. And at the same time, if you then replace your 500 watt motor with the larger 750 watt motor, you can now double that figure, which is 1,500 watts. And that's it. I hope this video has given you an idea of what the two upgrades, the EggRider and the 35 amp controller, can do for your bike. They are brilliant upgrades. They will make a tremendous difference. You know, the vast majority of the people that I speak to aren't looking for speed. They're looking for help, more assistance, getting up hills in tougher terrain. Both the EggRider and the 35 amp controller do that beautifully. I don't have a preference for either. They both have their place. I have the EggRider on my cargo bike, on my Rad wagon. I've tried the 35 amp controller on my cargo bike, and personally for me, it produces a little too much power, especially when I've got my kids on the back. I don't need to be racing around. The EggRider will suffice beautifully, and I can ride at 15 mile an hour, and I'll encounter a hill, and I'll maintain that speed because the watts increase. And again, watts equal hill climbing power, right? And that's it. It's as simple as that. Let me know in the comments below if you've got any questions. If I haven't covered something in this video that you are curious about, then have a look in the link below to our Facebook group, join that, or get in touch with me. Yeah, and hopefully I'll see you out there. Thank you.